Chances are you're familiar with the music you've just heard. It was written by composer John Williams, and it's the score to the movie Star Wars. Now, Star Wars was released in 1977. It was written and directed by George Lucas. It's gone on to be one of the highest grossing movies of all time, earning over $460 million. It's led to the creation of numerous films, TV shows, books, toys, etc. However, if it wasn't for a man named Frank Herbert, chances are you never would have heard that music, known who Luke Skywalker was, or cared about Jedi Knights and Darth Vader. But you might be saying to yourself, why should I care? Well, you should care because the movie Star Wars has been embedded into our culture. It's part of our national fabric. It's iconic, with the type of music you only need to hear the first few notes of to know exactly what it is that you're hearing. And that's powerful. In fact, in 2012, Disney bought the rights to Lucasfilms for $4 billion. That's a lot of money, and that makes this a very big deal. Dune is set on the desert planet Arrakis. It involves the young son of a nobleman. His name is Paul Atreides, and it's learned throughout the story that he has special powers. By the end of the story, Paul actually ends up leading a rebellion against the ruler of the universe, the Emperor. What I hope to show in this speech is all the similarities between the Dune novel and the subsequent film Star Wars, which was released over 12 years after Dune was first published. I want to show that without Dune, we'd be missing a part of our culture. Now first, let's start with the protagonists, each of whom have been given a biblical name, Paul and Luke. Paul and Luke both learn of their powers while on a desert planet. In Dune, the planet is Arrakis. In Star Wars, the planet is Tatooine. In Dune, we learn that the bad guy is the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who actually turns out to be Paul's grandfather, whereas in Star Wars, Darth Vader turns out to be Luke's father. One of the powers that Paul learns is called the Voice. It's used to detect truth and to control minds, which sounds an awful lot like Jedi mind control. In Star Wars, we have the Princess Leia, who turns out to be Luke's sister. But guess what? Paul also has a sister, and oddly enough, her name is Alia. In both stories, we have bad boy ladies men who are fighting on the good side. In Dune, it's Duncan Idaho, and in Star Wars, it's Han Solo. Now, if this was all the evidence that there was, it might be dismissible. But let's dig a little bit deeper and look at some of the other similarities. Jedi Knights are an ancient society. They claim to serve mankind, are expert fighters, and they have supernatural abilities. In Dune, the counterpart is the Bene Gesserit, and they can claim many of the same traits. In fact, the Jedi training technique is referred to as Jedi Bindu, whereas the Bene Gesserit training technique is referred to as Prana Bindu. In Star Wars, we have the Trade Federation, and the Trade Federation has a monopoly on shipping. In Dune, we have the Spacing Guild, which has a monopoly on shipping and travel. In Star Wars, Luke's Uncle Owen owns a moisture farm. In Dune, people own dew collectors, which collect moisture. In Dune, the most valuable commodity is spice. Sandcrawlers are actually a machine that are used to mine the spice. C-3PO, a character from Star Wars, actually makes a comment during the movie about getting sent to a spice mine. Now, there's quite a few more points of resemblance between the books and the movies, but I'm not going to go into too much detail during this speech. However, I'm not alone in wondering about some of the similarities. Frank Herbert actually spoke of having difficulty helping director David Lynch for the movie adaptation of Dune in 1984. The trouble was the fact that Star Wars had actually used up so much of Dune. He actually was able to find 16 points of identity between his novel and the movie. But if that's not enough to convince you, let me leave you with this from Tim Weber's research. The original script for Star Wars was actually rejected by the studio because it was almost a carbon copy of Dune. In fact, George Lucas had to hire Gary Kurtz to rewrite the script to a point where they both felt that they wouldn't get sued by the Herbert partnership for plagiarism. Now, this speech is in no way intended to take away from the greatness that is Star Wars. And as we all get ready to stand in line on December 18th for The Force Awakens, the next installment in the Star Wars franchise, let's all be sure to give a little nod and an acknowledgement of thanks and gratitude to Frank Herbert, without which probably none of Star Wars would have happened. Thank you.